All right. Normally at the top of the episodes here, we don't jump right into the movie that we're talking about. But this movie we're covering today has me thinking. A big thing I remember from the trailers for this film, we'll be talking about Gemini Man today, is it's maybe like the epitome of the slow, earnest version of a pop song that plays during the trailer. You know, that was like a trend for like 5 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trailers and movies themselves, but this one had Forever Young, which I think is originally a Bob Dylan song, but covered a million times. But it was like almost like an Imogen Heap version, like a vocoder doing it. So you almost don't even recognize what song it is until a few seconds. But it's just a real slow, melancholy version of Forever Young. Obviously, that song thematically ties into the movie here, but why it has to be this like slow, boring version of the song, I don't know. But that was such a big so many movies did that in the trailers. I remember Black Widow does like a slow cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit, you know, because that movie takes place in the 90s, or at least in part takes place in the 90s, so you gotta reference it, but it's gotta be this new melancholy version. I think maybe the first instance I can think of is Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch, where like the entire score to that movie is just slow versions of pop songs. But I don't know. What's up with this, Andrew? Why do so many trailers do this?
I think you know, people think it's clever. Like they think, you know, it one, there's obviously an intention that you recognize the song, and then you're just like, oh, hey, I know this song. But there became a point where, like, the usage of, like, classic rock or vintage pop, and, like, Forever Young, I don't think is by Bob Dylan. I think Alphaville did that originally, and it was, like, 84. But,
I'm going to be fiercely Googling this as you continue to talk.
But, and I look at things sort of like Guardians of the Galaxy, the usage it had of, you know, classic rock on its soundtrack. I think people kind of just assumed, like, the first Guardians soundtrack had, you know, Hooked on a Feeling blaring through that trailer, and I think that kind of tied that in. But then stuff like Zack Snyder and others decided that, like, oh, well, we can use that, but, like, we can make it slow and epic and heavy, and it became this trend that, gonna be honest with you, #PP, I hate it. I don't really care for it. I think generally it's another one of those things where I feel like they're just doing it to do it. They're not doing it because they think it ties in thematically. Like in Gemini Man, the whole reason it's Forever Young is like, oh, hey, there's a young version of Will Smith in the trailer. Get it? Like, get it? And I'm like,
but
cool.
That still doesn't explain why they don't just use the original version. Which, by the way, Forever Young, it's a song by Bob Dylan, recorded in 1973 for his 14th studio album, Planet Waves. But like
there's two songs out there called Forever Young then.
I mean, that's totally possible. It could be more than that.
Because the song in that trailer is not the Bob Dylan song.
Interesting. Well, now there's a whole... Because I'm looking at... I'm on the Wikipedia page for it. There's a Rod Stewart version. There's a Joan Baez version. There's a Pretenders version. Like, this is a version that's been covered a million times.
Forever Young is a song by German synth-pop band Alphaville, released as the third single from the song's titular debut album. The single has been covered by numerous artists and also formed the basis of Jay-Z's song Young Forever. Composers are Marion Gold, Bernhard Lloyd, and Frank Mertens of Alphaville. Samples and covers at the end of 2009. Also in 2019, Frederick Lloyd, under his Ursine Vulpine alias, recorded a cover of the song. His cover was featured in the trailer for the 2019 film Gemini Man, as well as the 2021 video game New World.
Well, there you go. This intro is taking on a whole different turn here, because doesn't it say, may you stay forever young? Like, isn't that, let us die young and let's live forever. We don't have the power, but we never say never. Sitting in a sandpit, life is a short trip. The music's half of the end. Where's the chorus to this damn song? Forever young. I want to be forever young. I think Bob Dylan does, may you stay forever young. It says, I want to be forever young. Well, Today I learned there's two songs out there called Forever Young that both seem to be
Anyway, the reason they do
popular.
different versions is because they want the trailer to feel epic. And obviously, the Alphaville version of Forever Young does not sound slow, dramatic, and epic. It sounds like an 80s German synth pop song. So, do you want to create this sweeping epic scale, but you want to use words that people are familiar with? So, it led to a trend of taking popular pop rock songs, turning them. I mean, the Wonder Woman trailer in 1984 did like a grand symphonic version of Blue Monday by New Order. It's because that makes it sound cool, because we can't just play Blue Monday by New Order, even though the song is great. But I don't know. It's still a trend. It still happens. You still see it with trailers where like they put out a trailer that's like, I think even Thunderbolts might have done it, where like it used some vintage classic rock song drawn and like out and made into an epic sweeping thing. Or maybe, I don't remember, but still do it.
Yeah, Power Rangers, the 2017 movie, the one we've covered on our show. For that trailer, I remembered it was something. I just looked it up. It was Halsey doing a cover of Walk the Line by Johnny Cash. Now, thematically, I don't know how that ties in at all, but but there you go. It's just a thing that we did for a while there. But I don't know. I think we're mostly past this trend. I think it's feels a little passe at this point. So let's just go ahead and bring in that theme song.
They're not talking about the best of them. They're just talking about the rest of them. Not the worst parts, but the best parts. This is the best of the rest. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my clone host, Andrew Williams. Say something to the listeners, Andrew.
Something to the listeners.
Each week, we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Clone Month! And this week, we are talking the 2019 film Gemini Man. Andrew, before we get into the specifics of this movie, let's talk about this new theme we got here. Clone Month. Yep. Or as you pitched this one here. You sent me a lineup of movies we could cover. And you're like, all right, here's an idea. It's called I Think I'm a Clone Now. And you sent me a list of movies. I'm like, Andrew, that's great. And I love that name. And you were very, you could have just said, thanks, I'm hilarious. But you're like, well, clearly you've never heard the Weird Al song. And I said,
I think my exact words were, thanks, I stole it from Weird Al.
Yeah, you immediately gave credit, which is respectable, because I would have totally believed that was not the case. But either way, I think I'm a clone now. We've a pretty ripe category. I mean, we narrowed it down to 4. We had a few alternates, some other directions we could have gone. And if you want to see the whole lineup, jump into our Discord. We've got it all listed there. But a rich category here. There's
a desire to do a particular movie in this lineup that I've been trying to crack how we could do that for a long time, and I finally had the genesis of what we could do for that, and it seemed like a good little maybe off the beaten path theme. I think our selections are interesting. They give us a chance to talk about some things we've talked about before, some people we haven't talked about before, and then wrap it up with a pretty tremendous finale. So I'm excited about it.
We've got some action. We've got some high concept sci-fi. We got some comedy. I mean, clones have been used to do a jumping off point for a lot of different stories here. So I'm excited to dive into it and look at all the different ways that this concept could be used. But today, it's all about the 2019 movie Gemini Man, a movie that I remember very vividly coming out, all the marketing, very heavily marketed. I feel like there's a lot of ads, trailers for it, and I never saw. I knew almost from the jump, look, hashtag PP, we're here to talk about the positives, and we're going to do that. But just kind of going back to 2019, I was like, this looks bad. I don't know. It didn't look bad. It just looked like something I was wholly not interested in.
This looks aggressively generic, was the exact thought I had when the trailer came out. Like, and again, hashtag PP, we're going to talk about the positives and watching it. Because I'll tell you, I never watched it. I've never.
Yeah, this was my first time watching the movie. Yeah.
I saw the trailer. I was like, oh, wow, Ang Lee's making a weird, like, and you'd heard about it. You were like, Ang Lee's making a sci-fi movie with Will Smith playing two versions of himself. And this was before the slap. So, like, people were still pretty into Will Smith. And I guess people are still kind of into Will Smith, but like, I just want to say, in the offenses of Hollywood history, slapping Chris Rock is pretty low, guys. There's a
lot to unpack there. We'll get
there, but or we won't. We'll figure out how we're gonna play that. But it's just interesting that it kind of got a decent amount of hype, and then that trailer came out, and everyone was like, "Okay, I guess." Like there was just this kind, like the trailer in general, just kind of felt like it was met with this like aggressive, like, "Oh, okay," like, and then the hype just kind of immensely
here's the thing.
died, I felt.
The poster for this, the entire marketing is built around Will Smith versus Will Smith. I mean, the poster is literally like old Will Smith, big VS, young Will Smith. And that's not a 2019 movie. We are well past the age of movie star. You know, that's like a 90s, maybe early 2000s thing where you're like, oh yeah, I'll go see the next Brad Pitt movie, the next Will Smith movie, the next Tom Cruise movie. Like that doesn't exist anymore. You know, like a big name doesn't sell a movie. I mean, like people have said like Tom Cruise is the last movie star because people will, but I think that's only true of his Mission Impossible movies. Like I still don't think he's that ironclad of a bankable box. There you go. I mean, you know, Will Smith, I mean, I think like maybe Pursuit of Happiness, I Am Legend was maybe the very end of his like marquee Will Smith movies. But once you start getting things like, God, what's the M. Night Shyamalan movie that we covered on this podcast? After Earth. Yeah. Stuff like that. Focus. I mean, there's plenty of just maybe not flops, but middling Will Smith movies. Like it was no longer like guaranteed to be a high profile thing, but this movie, this marketing is treating it like, well, that's all we got to say. It's Will Smith versus Will Smith, and people are going to flood to the theaters. And that didn't happen, which is why, in part, why we're covering it on this podcast. It also did not review very well. Let's go ahead and set the stage here. The movie is released October 11th, 2019. Very interesting. This wasn't a summer movie. It's made on a budget of $138 million. At the box office, it only brings in $173.5 million. I just want to say real quick, that budget, lower than I expected, although I'm sure the marketing was absurd. That box office was a little higher than I expected. I thought this flat out flopped, but it's only a failure when you look at its high budget. It did not. It lost a lot of money for the studio.
Domestically, it made $48.5 million.
Okay, that's a little bit more in line with what I thought here. So this movie played decently overseas.
It made $20.5 million opening weekend. So it makes almost half of its entire domestic run in the first weekend. Drops to $8 million the next weekend, a 60% drop basically. Drops to $4 million the next weekend, 51. Basically, it drops 50%, over 50% those first 3 weekends after the first one, and then it's an astronomical drop every week after that. And by Thanksgiving, it's basically gone. So the entire run of this movie in theaters is basically sick.
Not only did this movie not generate much buzz, but it was not helped by its critical reception. It holds just a 27% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's panned by critics. Now, I will say, I was very surprised to see the Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 83%. That is like a Venom level disparity. That's the word. Disparity. That's what I was. The disparity. I knew it wasn't right as it's coming out of my mouth, Andrew. That's a huge gulf between the critic reception and the audience reception, which I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm baffled by, but I am surprised. I am surprised it is that big of a difference. Because like Venom, going back to that first one, you can say, oh, it's a dumb, fun movie. I can kind of get why audiences are like, yeah, whatever, it's a good time, and critics are harsher. I get that. This one, I don't know. Although I will say we'll put a pin in this. But if you were to ask me, Chris, give this movie simply a thumbs up or thumbs down, which is all Rotten Tomatoes is gauging, I might struggle with that.
Yeah,
we'll come back to it.
When you pointed out to me that it was an 83%, I was genuinely like, "What?" I couldn't believe that. I was
because
like,
I heard nothing
way.
about this movie. Like,
No.
It's not like
Well,
heard.
I'll say this. The critic score is also based off a large sample size. Critic score is off 328 reviews. So, to be fair, that means like almost 100 of them are positive. But like the popcorn meter is off of 5,000, which means that all that means is it's less than 10,000. But still, like I'm just kind of but you'll see movies that have like 200,000 verified ratings and stuff like that. They get super high numbers of audience reviews. So generally speaking, this audience size is a little smaller than normal, but like that implies that like there's a dedicated Gemini Man fan base out there that all went and reviewed the movie on Rotten Tomatoes, which just feels like an insane thing to say out loud.
This movie has 3 credited writers, but it's got a long, complicated production history. It changed hands multiple times. It's really hard to pick apart what elements of the movie came from what stage of production. But at the end of the day, when it's all negotiated, 3 people get credit. First off, we have David Benioff, who we have actually discussed before because he was a writer on X-Men Origins, Wolverine, also a writer on Troy, on the movie Stay, which is a personal favorite of mine, and that's the movie I'm trying to get covered on this podcast, even though no one remembers that it exists. The 25th Hour, the Edward Norton movie. So he's got some...
Didn't you recommend 25th Hour to me too?
No, I don't know if I've seen that. I
recommended
remember the
25th
poster
Hour
is like Edward Norton and a dog, but I don't know if I ever actually saw that movie. So
It's on my Vudu wish list, and I don't know how it got there. I'm trying to remember who it was that said you should watch 25th Hour, and I can't remember. I can't think of who it was, but
it was not me, Andrew.
Yeah.
I do love the idea that like I'm just ferociously recommending Popstar, MacGruber, and the super serious drama, The 25th Hour.
I was gonna say I was looking for a month of just like movies Chris has spent months telling Andrew to watch. But
we just covered the Chris Gethard Show episode, One Man's Trash, as an episode of our podcast.
Yeah, but anyway, Benioff, interesting. Obviously, Game of Thrones, probably the thing he's most notable for now, I would say. He basically, in 2009, he writes X-Men Origins Wolverine, Brothers, and then almost leaves movies for a decade, because in that decade, he starts doing Game of Thrones. And also randomly wrote an episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Just, that will always be strange to me that he did that. And then has recently worked on the television adaptation of The Three Body Problem, which is a very... Three Body Problem is a Chinese science fiction novel that is very, very heady. It's like reading a textbook, but it's very good, but it takes some work to digest it. I do think his involvement with this is interesting. So you talked a little bit about the production history of the film, but so one of the guys we're going to talk about develops the original pitch for this in 97. So it's a movie that takes 22 years from the selling of the original pitch until it's actually put out there. So I'm guessing, and if you read through the concepts, Benioff apparently penned the 2009 version of the script, kind of when he was really kind of in vogue in Hollywood and getting a lot of big ideas and big kind of opportunities. That's when he comes in and he pens the latest draft of the script in February of 2009. That's, I think, his involvement. So I don't think he did anything in between. So the final version that gets made, obviously, I think is credited yet the third writer who does the final passes. But obviously, if those two are credited, it means there's enough DNA of their script still on that final script. that they have to get credited for, but this was definitely not something that he was working on like while Game of Thrones was happening. I also do find it funny that he wrote the movie Brothers, which is the movie where Tobey Maguire and Jake Gyllenhaal play brothers, because everyone kept saying for years they should do that, and nobody remembers that there's actually a movie where they do that.
So I remember that movie. I know I've seen it, don't remember anything about it. But Andrew, me, the person who's terrible with faces and always confuses actors, I have never thought that about Tobey Maguire and Jake Gyllenhaal. Personally. I don't know. Do you think they look incredibly alike?
I mean, I would say they could look they could be related, sure. Like the rumor was, I guess, at a point where like Jake Gyllenhaal almost replaced Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 2 because he got hurt.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where it started. That like Jake Gyllenhaal was the copy paste for Tobey Maguire at a certain point. But I think that's where it kind of started. And then I just do think it's funny that it's one of those things that like happened, but nobody remembers that it happened, which is always funny to me. It's like when people ask Bruce Campbell endlessly, "Hey, are you ever going to be in another Evil Dead movie?" Not realizing that he played Ash on an Evil Dead television show for 3 whole seasons. Like, guys, it's out there. Like the thing you want.
You want to see old
already.
Ash?
Like,
there's a lot of
there it
footage
is.
of it, yeah.
There's a lot of it, and like you said, it's not like it's one movie. There's 3 whole seasons of it to go watch. Like, go to town. It's there.
All right, those other 2 credited writers are Billy Ray, who is another alum of the show because he was a writer on Terminator, Dark Fate, the Terminator Legacy sequel that I really like and recommend. Also a writer, steadily working since like the 90s, things like Volcano and Flight Plan, and still out there doing his thing.
Yeah, he also wrote a movie I absolutely loved in 2018 called Overlord, which was basically a Wolfenstein movie starring Wyatt Russell.
Man, I remember buying that movie, being so excited. I saw it on sale. I have not watched it. I bought it like awesome. 5 years ago. It looks like awesome. So much fun, but I've not got around to watching it.
It is so good. That was the one where I was like, oh, Wyatt Russell. Like, I'm into it. Let's do it. Very, very
What did
good.
You think about Wyatt Russell in Thunderbolts, Andrew? I don't know if we've talked about Thunderbolts on our...
We haven't. I liked it.
Yeah.
Should I not?
No. I also enjoyed the movie, but I will say I thought he was fine in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I didn't love that show overall, but he's very good in Thunderbolts. I don't know who my Mark Strong award is, but I wouldn't call somebody crazy and say it's Wyatt Russell because he's such a douche and he's so unlikable, but I like him. Like that can be such a hard line to walk, but I think he does it so well.
He does, and that's how John Walker's supposed to be. So it's perfect. Anyway, Billy Ray, I'm guessing he gets the credit for the last version of the script. He's the guy that comes in last to kind of punch it up and kind of get the script to the finish line. There's been, like I said, you look through this Wikipedia, there's like 18 people that have worked on this script. Billy Ray is one of the later revisions. So I'm guessing those 3, their versions of the script, were the ones that ultimately got them across the finish line. But yeah, an interesting career. Like you said, Volcano, Flight Plan, but also stuff like The Hunger Games, Captain Phillips, then like I said, Overlord, Dark Fate, Richard Jewell, the Clint Eastwood biopic with what is that guy's name?
I always just call him Derek because of I, Tonya.
But Walter Hauser.
I guess his name wasn't Derek, but he's saying he's what's the scene? I've done just the line so much I don't even remember like the context, but I think she's asking him about a hitman and like he knows someone, but he's like, I shouldn't even say his name. Derek. Just immediately says his name. He's great in Cobra Kai as well. He's got a recurring role there.
Anyway, but yeah, just Billy Ray, a name that I'm sure we talked about him when we did Dark Fate, but I certainly don't remember him. So,
Darren Lemke, just to round out the credited writers, someone who is definitely having a moment at the time when this movie comes out, wrote Goosebumps, the very well received Jack Black movie adaptation of that series, which I again own, haven't watched. I've heard it's great. Then of course Shazam as well, which is one of DC's absolute best superhero movies. So, like I said, really on a hot streak at this time.
Yeah. and then went on to do writing credits on Kung Fu Panda 4. Also did the Wheel of Time television show. He was an executive producer. Yeah, lots of stuff there. So an interesting career. If I had a nickel for every time he worked on the fourth installment of a franchise, I would have 2 nickels. Which is not a lot, but it's weird it happened twice because he also does Shrek Forever After. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting is that this is his pitch in the late '90s, which is interesting. It's like he doesn't have any credits in the late '90s, so it's like I guess he's just selling pitches, and just none of them were getting to the finish line very quickly. It's just interesting to see that it kind of takes him so long to get to the finish line, but good for him. He stuck with it. Eventually got his successes as a writer, and but it sounds like his involvement with Gemini Man is very limited once it gets to actual production. Like he hadn't really touched the script in a really long time, but given that it was his idea and the idea always revolved around the older and younger version of the same guy, there was always presumably going to have to be story, and in this case, script credit for him. So, good for him. Get that bag.
And the movie is directed by the one and only Ang Lee. Again, alum of the show. We covered Hulk a long time ago, but Ang Lee, very, very interesting filmmaker, because I think to this day, despite some of the movies in his filmography, his name just carries a weight, like a sense of importance. Like he's just very well respected, well regarded. Like I said, regardless of some of the reception of his movies, his career begins. He makes a lot of films in Taiwan before making his way to Hollywood, and really breaks through with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was, took the country by storm, or whatever little moniker you want to put on that. But that movie was a big deal. Follows that up with Hulk, which, we've covered on the show. It had a very negative response. I was going to say mixed or polarizing, but it was not well received. But then he follows that up with Brokeback Mountain, which is a critical darling, and kind of floats back and forth. I feel like Life of Pi was a big return to winning over audiences. God. But then he makes Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which no one remembers. So it's just very up and down with his movie's receptions. But again, throughout it all, I think there's never, I don't know, I feel like he's never going to have trouble getting a movie made. And his name just carries that weight to it,
I feel really bad because when I saw the trailer for Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, I thought of Walk Hard. Because at the beginning of Walk Hard, the guy makes the joke that before Dewey goes out and plays, he has to think about his entire life. And the whole movie of the Long Halftime Walk felt like it was the same idea of he's walking out into the field during the football game, but before he can do that, he has to think about his entire life.
Yes.
I was like, oh, that's not a nice thing to think, Andrew. An interesting career. Obviously, we talked about him on Hulk, but obviously he starts off with Chinese films, things like Pushing Hands, The Wedding Banquet, and then eventually does come stateside with an adaptation of Sense and Sensibility, or that might have been the UK, maybe. I don't remember, but I think that was made in the aftermath of the Pride and Prejudice adaptation, maybe right before it. I don't remember, but then after that, he does The Ice Storm, which is a big independent drama film, very, very good. And then eventually busts out with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That's his breakout moment. But then, like you said, Hulk to Brokeback Mountain. He does a movie called Lust Caution, which is just I love the description. It's a 2007 erotic spy romantic mystery film. I was like, that's a lot of words to describe a movie. So many genres that it goes through. But so he goes back and forth. He reminds me a little bit of John Woo in that sense, where he'd come over here and he'd make something that was successful, and then he'd have something that didn't do well. So he'd go back to China for a little bit, make a movie there that did do well, then come back across. Just kind of, always be closing. Don't misunderstand me. But But yeah, to this point, Gemini Man is his last stateside film.
So it looks like he's the long rumor is going to be that he's going to make a movie about Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali's fight, the Thriller in Manila, and he's been in one way or another working on that since before Billy Lynn. So that's potentially his next movie. But I also just read this real quick. This is exactly what the line, like, this is just on like Wikipedia, so take it for what it is. But it says, Lee announced in November 2022 that he is working on a biopic on the life of Bruce Lee, starring his son, Mason Lee. And for a second, I thought, does Bruce Lee have a son that I've never known about? Like, he just has the 2 kids, right? And Brandon Lee died. It's Ang Lee's son, but it's very confusingly worded. But Ang Lee has a son named Mason Lee that may be playing Bruce Lee in a future movie.
Yeah, we'll see. Obviously, I don't presume the man really needs to work at this point. His career, I'm sure, has been very formative for him. But it is an interesting career. Obviously, like I said, we talked about him on Hulk, but just it's the fact that he followed up Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon with Hulk is always going to be like a really weird thing to me, just because it doesn't feel like what you do when you've just made like a massive international success. But the man wanted to make a Hulk movie with page turn transitions, and all the more power to him.
All right, Andrew. I think it's time. I think it's time that we jump into this movie to talk about the positives, everything we like about the movie Gemini Man. Are you ready?
Yes.
Henry Brogan is a retired secret operative that specialized in carrying out top-secret assassinations. But just as he steps away from the job, his former government employer tries to have him killed. Things are further complicated when the assassin that is sent to kill him is actually his clone. Henry recruits Danny, the agent assigned to keep an eye on him, and Baron, a former Marine colleague, to help him discover how this came to be. This leads him face to face with Clay Varys, the man that has secretly cloned Henry to create the perfect soldier. All right, Andrew, from the trailers of this movie, I feel like I had an idea in my head of what the story would be, and I was right. I mean, I think there's not a lot of like twists and turns. It's kind of exactly how you think it's going to play out. What you think the situation's going to be is kind of exactly it. And that's neither good nor bad. That's just kind of, I don't know. This movie's very straightforward for having this high concept premise. And there's like the first 20 minutes, it feels like there's a very dense plot, a lot of twists and turns, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and that was, I think, ultimately, I think it's one of the biggest criticisms the movie got, is that for this intense technology, for the, high caliber director, for presumably the big name star with Will Smith, like, the movie is just, and I don't say this to be backhanded. There's plenty of movies that have deeply predictable plots that are still very, very good. Like, predictability is not a problem within a story, because if you've built the story correctly, you should sort of be able to figure out where it goes. I know Poirot is going to figure out who killed this person in the middle of the library, because it's what he does. It's not predictable. It doesn't make the story bad because Poirot figured it out again. But people were just kind of like, oh, that's it. Like, they were just kind of expecting it to be a little bit more high concept, I guess, that there was going to be a little bit more at play here. But ultimately, it's just Will Smith versus Will Smith versus Clive Owen.
Yeah,
versus
he's
other Will Smith
versus. Spoiler alert! Yeah, there's another Will Smith out there.
Yet another.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the scenes and the decisions this movie makes. But first, we're going to talk about this cast. We're going to start with the high point: best casting, best performance in the movie, because every episode recognizes one person and goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire movie with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, why don't you kick us off? Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Gemini Man?
In a movie where Will Smith plays half the main characters, I am still going to go with Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Danny. As what is her character's name? Danielle Zakharewski. She, as you pointed out, she is basically stationed near where Henry lives to essentially keep an eye on him after he retires. This is one of that classic, like, when they retire, they want to keep an eye on. When you retire, they want to keep an eye on you to make sure that you're not doing anything that you shouldn't be doing. And it is revealed / shown that she is not one of the people out to get him. She was truly just stationed there to keep an eye on him. That's all she's there for. But she gets to do a little bit more with her performance, I think, than Will Smith does. Will Smith is obviously keeping this very serious, very grounded, very dire. He doesn't quite get to kind of lean into all the Will Smith charm that you kind of know him for, which is kind of interesting. It's a similar issue, I think, with After Earth to a degree, where like the character is put in a position where he has to be just not typically what you expect of Will Smith's performances. Like, you think of Will Smith, you think of Agent J, you think of Bad Boys, you think of the stuff where he gets to be kind of in the action, super cool, super awesome, but there's that charm, there's that charisma, there's the quips, there's the one-liners. All of that's played a little bit differently here, and I'm not saying that's a bad decision. Like, the older Will Smith is clearly, like, he's run down. He's been through the ringer, and he's kind of done with all of it, whereas the younger version is very much like a deer in the headlights to a lot of things. But, so that allows Mary Elizabeth Winstead to kind of slide into that kind of more sarcastic, more, little bit more of a range in the character. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead is great. We think we've talked about her before. She's briefly in Die Hard 5, but,
yeah.
She's more heavily seen in Die Hard 4, but don't know that we'll ever cover that one because it was well-liked and made money. But anyway, she's great. I like most of the things that I've seen her in, back to Scott Pilgrim, Birds of Prey, things like that. But here, she gets a good range. She's also not just, like, along for the ride. She gets to also, like, take part in the action. There's a whole cool scene where her and Will Smith are walking through, taking out all these agents that are coming to try to get him, and she's standing right next to Will Smith, taking these guys out. And I think that, I was like, hell yeah. But, good stuff. I liked it.
Yeah, you know what? I agree. She's also getting my Mark Strong Award, which I did not expect. But when I'm thinking about the performances and like which character I'm liking and responding to, she's by far my favorite. I mean, it's less about her elevating the movie and more about her elevating the role she's giving. I mean, she's punching so far above and beyond what's being asked of her in this role. In a role where, like, it could very easily slip into the background, very easily be like a faux romantic interest. You know, there's scenes in here where she has to, like, strip to her underwear for basically no reason. I mean, there's like so many tropes in here that are working against her, but she still elevates and feels like a 3D fully realized character. She's smart and witty without being just a one-note quirky girl in the movie. Like you said, she has a believable fight scene. She's a badass, but she's also very smart and gains the respect of Will Smith's character. I mean, she's knocking it out of the park. She's great. And I agree, just a great actor. I mean, there's a lot of things I've seen her in that I didn't realize. Like, I never really put all together that it's the same person. I mean, she's Ramona Flowers in Scott Pilgrim, a movie that I think I've sent on Mike. I'm not the biggest fan of. Maybe we'll get around to covering that, but she's great in it. I'm seeing she's in Sky High. Maybe we'll cover that on this podcast one day. Or perhaps Final Destination 3. She's somewhere in Death Proof. Is she part of the first group of people? Where's she at in Death Proof?
She's the cheerleader.
Oh, the one they leave
that gets
behind.
left behind.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, see,
I'm sure that
never
worked out
put it
well
together.
for her.
It was. She lucky or not lucky for being left there? Left to the audience to decide. The Thing, the 2011 prequel to the movie, the Thing. The Thing prequel to the Thing. Maybe we'll cover that on this podcast. A movie that I stand up for and defend. But yeah, just agreeing with you. 10 Cloverfield Lane. I mean, yeah, I defend it. I think it's good and worth seeing.
Hey, me too. We're fine here.
All right.
All right. It's all good. you don't got to wind up there, man. It's all good.
I wasn't sure the way you questioned me. You wanted
that
me
was
to,
more like
to double down.
That was more like, did we just become best friends again type thing? Like that was more of like.
I like it.
You do this too?
I like it.
Yeah. We should save it for when we talk about it because now it's going to have to happen.
Now it has to happen.
It's what holds it back is just the fact that it has to be compared to the original, and that original is just such a high bar. Yeah. That's just an impossible thing to meet, but in every regard, it's very effective at what it's doing.
Very cool. Now I want to rewatch it, so we got to cover this podcast. And then Birds of Prey. She plays.
That's going to be the October theme this month. Is just Mary Elizabeth Winstead movies. So we'll just do The Thing.
Okay.
We'll do Final Destination 3. We'll do Scott Pilgrim. We'll do that. We'll do Birds of Prey. There we go.
There we go. She's the Huntress in Birds of Prey. Maybe my Mark Strong Award winner. I haven't rewatched that movie since theaters, but she was fantastic. Just the awkwardness of the Huntress, I thought was a very funny decision. Anyway, she's great here, getting my Mark Strong Award. I'm glad we're agreeing there. But that's not to say there's not other great performances. We're going to go through the whole cast. And look, of course, we got to talk about Will Smith playing playing basically two characters in this movie. You've got Will Smith Prime, Henry, the retired assassin, and then you got his clone, who's like 22, 23, I think they say, and looks like a young Will Smith. There's a lot of CGI and body doubling and just very expensive special effects that goes into pulling this off. I think you probably couldn't have cast anyone better than Will Smith in this role, because Will Smith has grown up on screen. We very much know what a young Will Smith looks like. I mean, this is Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Will Smith. We saw him for 6 seasons or whatever that show was, as well as some of his early roles, Bad Boys. Like, we're getting young Will Smith, someone we are very familiar with. So it gets tricky to talk about. This is... We'll talk before we get to the performance. I want to talk a little bit about the effects and how they pull this off. Because on the one hand, I watched this movie and I'm like, man, this looks expensive. This is insanely impressive that they pulled this off. In a lot of ways, this is the best version I've ever seen of this. But at the same time, during most action scenes with Junior, as he's called, I can't help but be like, that's a little janky. Some better than others, but I can always tell that there's some digital trickery going on. And I don't know, maybe in another 10 years we'll be beyond that, and this will be impossible to tell when they're doing this. But I'm simultaneously in awe, and I don't know if I'm pulling it out of the movie, but it's also, I'm in all of it and also very aware that I'm watching a special effect. How about that?
It's the range of, shall we say, the quality of the work is very wild to me. And just, hashtag PP, I'm not trying to backhand anything, but like, there's moments where they're talking to each other and it looks, like you said, the best it's ever looked. And then there's moments during the fights where, like, to me, it almost looks like the characters are fighting or CG, because like the arms just don't move right or something. It's very weird.
Yeah.
But the way they pull off the quiet moments is deeply impressive, because, you think of something like Tron Legacy, where it probably wasn't quite there. It's still way better than anything that had ever been tried like that before. But still, there's that rubbery sense to Kevin, to Clue's face, when he's playing the younger, version of Jeff Bridges. And so there's always, and of course, of all the things Disney goes back and fix, they won't do that one, which I've complained about many times now. I understand. But
what if I told you they're making a new Tron, Andrew?
Oh,
Did you wish for that? I was about to say, did you wish for that with a monkey paw?
I apparently didn't realize it, but I did. I can't. Oh God, I just. I don't want to whine, but like, why'd you got to do like this, Disney? Come on, like, I just every time
is he playing
Jared Leto's announced for
a
something.
good guy? Is he like the hero?
I think so. I think
because that's the worst
Ares.
use of that's the worst possible scenario.
Like, the best
is that it's starring.
His best performance is possibly Blade Runner, where he just plays the insanely out of touch, weird villain. Like,
yeah,
that's what he should do.
Very believable.
Ignoring the fact that there's all the weird personal controversies about him, so you just shouldn't use him at all. But like, yeah, why'd you got to do me like that, Disney? Jesus. But anyway, they make generally speaking, I was impressed with how Will Smith looked in this movie, but there were moments when they were together, mostly the action stuff, where it's just there's something that's not quite there. A lot of the movie also takes place at night or in the dark, which also helps smooth over some of the lines, I think, because there are sequences not in the dark that I think don't look quite as good, but still, it's impressive what they pull off here. And it's a little bit of an issue sometimes too, because you take something like The Irishman, where they de-age Pacino and De Niro, and part of the issue I have with The Irishman, one, is that like we know what De Niro looked like. Yes, that's issue one. Issue two is that like it's in that same regard, we know what De Niro looked like 40 years ago. Because we saw movies he was in the 80s, and we know what he looked like 50 years ago because we saw movies in the 70s. And when his de-aged version doesn't look like that, it kind of creates a weird, jarring effect where you're like, oh, well, that's not what that guy looked like. The other problem, obviously, with The Irishman is that you're having 80-plus-year-old De Niro play a 30-year-old. And like the curb stomp scene is the one they always point out.
Yeah, I see that clip all the time.
It's just so jarring how, despite the fact that you're using this insane technology and you are largely making him appear that way, it's mostly that like, yeah, but like you really should have had somebody else play the body in these scenes, because that is what they did here. I believe the actor's name, oddly, is Victor Hugo. That was like the on-set young Will Smith. And when they had to like interact together, he was the point of reference, I guess. And so,
is that Hugo Strange's real name? Is that why he said oddly? Is his first name Victor?
No, there's a very
it's
Hugo was a real person who wrote Les Miserables, the book, I think. As I furiously Googled this,
who is Victor Hugo?
I'm pretty sure I was correct. Yes,
Google just says Victor Hugo famously played Will Smith's double in Gemini Man.
No, he also, he wrote Les Miserables. But and then also wrote a little book called The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yes, I was correct. So I'm not losing
well done,
my mind.
Andrew.
But anyway, so it's interesting that the technology can only cover up so much. Will Smith obviously is still younger, so obviously not as physically limited in his movements as the 80-year-old Robert De Niro is. But right. It's still done pretty well, comparatively speaking. But there is some weirdness, which when you're doing things like this, I feel like no matter how good it gets, there's probably always going to be a little bit of weirdness. There's just some stuff you're just not going to be able to overcome. And Ang Lee does a really good job with his team and his crew of trying to mask that as much as possible. And I think in that regard, he does a pretty good job.
All right, Andrew, I have a very grand statement to make.
Uh-oh.
Because we throughout the years we've been doing this podcast, this has come up again and again and again. Physical, special effects versus visuals. What am I trying to say here? CG versus practical. That's what I was trying to say.
Could not tell you.
So we've always been like, I always want to stop myself from being like, well, practical is better and CG isn't as good. Sometimes I feel that way, and some uses of it I feel that way, but I'm always like, there's a time and place for CG, and the best is a mix for both. But I've always struggled with like, why do I feel that way? Because my complaint about CG is always, well, I can tell it's not real. But you know what, Andrew? Whenever Yoda is played by a puppet, I can tell that's not real too. I know that's not really a little alien, so that can't be what it is. It can't just be that I can tell it's not real. So what is it? And I think I don't want to speak for everybody. I can't say this is why everyone that out there that says they like practical more CG feels the same way. But I'll speak for myself. I think I know what it is. Whenever I see a CG character, a visual effect, I know that's not real. And the leap in logic that I need to make in my brain is to convince myself that it's real. That's a leap in logic's not a nice way to say that. What's the nicer way to say that? The reality I gotta buy, oh my god.
The bridge you have to cross.
Yeah, but there's like a whatever the best word to use is there, but whenever I see a puppet playing Yoda or any other instance of a physical creature, I don't have to buy that it's real. What I'm buying is that is a character that can talk and have its own agency and interact with the world. That's the world I gotta buy. Not that it's real. I don't need to convince myself that it's real. And I think that's different. I think that's just a different part of the brain. And I'm accepting something different that for whatever reason, one is easier than the other. It's easier for me to look at Luke, talk to Yoda, and convince myself and buy the reality that is a sentient character. It's easier for me than if it's a CG character and I got to convince myself it's actually real and interacting with the world. I don't know, like, when I see CG, I just know that there's nothing on set, or there's a blue screen, or there's a whatever. Like, there's nothing actually there. But whenever it's a puppet, I know something's there, and it's tangible, and it is real. Like, I don't have to convince myself it is real. It's just, it's a different sort of leap in logic I need to make there. Just like, there's a scene in this movie where the camera is slowly panning around Junior's face, and he's talking to Clive Owen about his first time meeting with Henry and how he feels. It's real emotional, but I'm looking at like the face move weird and the skin's kind of waxy and the lips not quite matching up, and I'm just having a hard time buying this is a real thing I'm looking at. But whenever I see in Terminator 1 Arnold Schwarzenegger take out his eyeball, it's very clearly a puppet face, but I know it's a face. And even though I know it's not real Arnold, that goes down smoother for me than this does. And like I said, I don't want to speak for everybody. I'm not trying to act like I cracked the code for all these complaints, but I think that really is just a different part of my brain accepting the thing exists at all and just accepting that it can interact with this world.
So there's just two ways to look at something.
Well, one is easier for me than the other.
Journey. No, I'm kidding. That's a line from the Nice Guys. So there's just two ways to look at something. You lead me on this epic journey around all this world. And the only lesson is there's two ways to look at something. No. Well, I think the heart of what you're saying is that it's almost the intent in a way. Like when Yoda's a puppet, they're not trying to convince you that he's not a puppet. When the Terminator has a prop and he's pulling his eye out of his head, like, obviously they're doing the best they can there, but like, you, the audience, know that a man is not really pulling his eye out of his head. But when young Will Smith is on screen talking to Clive Owen, I'm supposed to believe that that's young Will Smith speaking to Clive Owen. It's a little bit the uncanny valley in that, like, you're supposed to just be watching a conversation between two people. But one of them is basically just CGI. And I think that's why it struggles so much, especially like in Star Wars, you almost can get away with this stuff a little bit more because of the nature of the world. Like, CG in Star Wars is not that uncommon. So like, even when Yoda's CG, like, it's whatever. But like, when it's supposed to just be two humans having a conversation and one of them just doesn't look quite right, it stands out a lot more than a human talking to Yoda, because Yoda's already an alien and he's not meant to be. I'm not supposed to believe that Yoda is a thing that you and I talk to. But in this movie, I am supposed to kind of believe that young Will Smith and Clive Owen are just two people having a conversation. So that uncanny valley in these kind of normal situations, I think, becomes a little harder to overcome because you just know it's there. but there's nothing else in the world doing that. Whereas within Star Wars, yeah, that Yoda's a puppet. That thing over there is CGI. That thing also is a puppet. That's like, it's a world full of things that are all quote unquote not real. But with this, there's just one thing that's not real. And when you keep pointing to that in a world where everything else is real, you can't help but feel like it's out of place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something there. I just, yeah, I
There's
get
just two ways to look at something. That's all there is.
I should have just said that. I don't know, but like, just to use these examples, when I see, this scene here with Junior talking and the scene with Terminator ripping his eyeball out, one of them, I go, wow, that's really cool how they did that. And one of them, I just go, ew. I don't know. I'm also, that's a little dismissive. I'm very impressed by what they pulled off in this movie, but still, it just hits my brain differently. You know what, we mentioned I, Tonya early in this very episode, and I remember seeing that, and it was a huge visual effects breakthrough the way they put Margot Robbie on a professional ice skater to pull that off. And when I watched those scenes, I was like, yeah, it looks a little weird though. Like I couldn't help but be like, was there anything wrong with the way we used to do this, where you show a shot of her leg skating and then a separate shot of her face reacting, and we just put together that it's the same person? Like, I get that you can now do wide shots and stuff because you can put her face on it, but like, I'm always aware that it's just you putting her face on it. Like, it looks a little bit off, and that's my, like, why am I off put by that instead of like it? I am in all of it. See, I don't know the exact word to use here, but like, I don't know why I have an averse reaction to that versus the practical stuff. And that's what I've landed on, that it's just, you're just buying something different. You're buying that thing existing versus buying that thing interacting in the world. I just think there's a slight difference in, like I said, maybe it doesn't apply to everybody. I don't know. But, some people can maybe watch the digital stuff without all this baggage or reverse reaction. I don't know, but I don't know, Andrew.
All that to say you don't know? Jesus.
I don't know. Yeah, all that.
No, I get what you're saying. I think for me, that's kind of what it is. It's just like, when there's just that one thing in the world, basically, that you're looking at and you're like, man, you're not right. Like, you don't match everything else. To me, it's just hard to just not.
Is that what it is? Because I think Thanos looks amazing. Like that. Like, that's always, if I haven't, this has never happened to me in real life, but if an imaginary person said that I just hate CG or CG characters, I'm like, no, I love Thanos. He looks great. I totally buy him in that world. And when the characters interact with him, I'm like, I know there's not a big purple guy there in reality, but I buy it. And maybe it's because he's looks different enough that I know like that couldn't be a human in makeup. Like, that's not possible. Like, I don't know why I buy Thanos.
That's
more
probably
than
part of it too. Just and that's kind of what I meant with the Star Wars thing. Marvel too is just like full of things that like Thanos isn't trying to look like a human because Thanos isn't a human. Like, again, but when you look at that scene with, like, just using the example of like Clive Owen talking to a young Will Smith, like, that's supposed to be a normal guy talking to another normal guy. Well, normal in the sense that they're both human. But like, when Thanos is talking to the Avengers, I'm not supposed to believe that Thanos is just a dude. Thanos is a purple alien from another planet. Like, I don't really have to question that. It's what he looks like. He looks like a purple alien from another planet, whereas young Will Smith looks kind of like young Will Smith, but there's just a weirdness to it.
Yeah, I'm simultaneously impressed and a little bit off-put, #PP, by the effects. But overall, like, it's very cool they're able to pull this off. We'll talk about it more in scenes. As far as Will Smith's performance, it's Will Smith. I mean, gosh, it's funny. We've talked about it before. I think we talked about Wild Wild West pre-slapping Chris Rock. And I'm sure I went on and on about how I think he's one of the great actors of all time. And I love so many of his performances. And by and large, I still feel that way. But like, the way in the years since, not just the slap, but just the more we see about Will Smith's personal life, the more we're just like, bro, are you okay? Like, are you like his his charm and stuff we're talking about earlier, this feels so much more of a performance than I think it ever did back in the day when we were more naive about the man and what must be going on in his life. So, because we also talked about, God, when did we talk about Will Smith again? He came up again on this podcast.
Men in Black
slap
2?
No, After Earth. And we talked about him again. Yeah. So, yeah, hey man, I hope you're okay. That's all. But he's still a great actor. He's clearly giving it his all. He has such a serious tone with his older version, I guess with his younger version too. Oddly, I think the younger version might be the better performance. I mean, whenever he is calling out Clive Owen for how much of a monster he is for doing what he did to him and the trauma he's caused him and stuff, it's really good teary-eyed performance. But of course, you're also thinking oh, those cheeks look a little too smooth. I don't know if this is real. Those lips aren't quite lining. It's hindered by that a little bit. But Will Smith is working his ass off underneath all that digital trickery.
I would agree that the younger performance just has a little bit more to dive into in that regard. Whereas the older performance is just kind of grizzled veteran hitman that's kind of 2 days from retirement. But it's pretty straightforward in what the older version is doing. The younger version actually has the inner trauma to an extent that older Will Smith is actually trying to save him from. So, but yeah, it's Will Smith. You know what you're getting.
Clive Owen plays our villain, Clay Verris. He is the creator of this clone. He runs a project called Gemini, who, as far as most characters know at the beginning of this movie, just trains special ops soldiers for specialized jobs, but he also makes clones. This seems to be a relatively new thing, putting clones in the field. But it was right there in the name. We should have known all along. That's why it's called Gemini. But for past 20 plus years, he's been raising a clone as his son, and happens to be a clone of Will Smith. So he is... It's funny, he's clearly a bad guy. He's the villain. Clive Owen's very good at being menacing. There's these interesting questions, and he brings a few of them up to a head in his final scenes of well, isn't it better to have a clone that you can make be unfeeling and send them off to die than to send humans? And is that ethical? Should we play God? What's really the harm? There's a lot of interesting questions there that the movie doesn't really ask. They just kind of scratch the surface. There's something there, but that is not the direction this movie wants to take.
Yeah, it kind of speed runs those questions right at the end in the final confrontation with Clive Owen and the Smiths. It like you said, it wants to ask these questions, but the movie just kind of forgets to ask them. And there's this 11th hour where suddenly Clive Owen is just trying to be haha, I actually am thinking of all of our it's this weird thing where at no point in the movie has Clive Owen's methodology or motives or anything been shown to be sympathetic or noble in any way. And then obviously at the 11th hour, he suddenly asks these not wrong questions, but we've not built or had any moment. It's dude, you just tried to kill your quote unquote son a minute ago. You can't really come in and say this is all for you so that we don't have to send soldiers home with PTSD anymore. And it's well, yeah, but these clones are still people. That's kind of the bigger question is Clive Owen sees the clones as disposable, whereas obviously they don't. So it's this speed run mad dash right at the end to be oh, here's some interesting questions to ask about this, but the movie doesn't really build to them. And, it is what it is. But it would have been nice if they had tried to seed some of that in a little bit more, punch that part of the plot up a little bit more.
And Benedict Wong is in this movie as Baron. This is Henry's old friend from back in the Marine days. He goes to him for some help trotting the globe and hiding out. And Benedict Wong is great, just like he always is. He really like all that charisma we're talking about. That's kind of absent from Will Smith here. Benedict Wong got it. He's got the charisma covered. Like we don't learn too much about him. He really doesn't have too much screen time, but the energy that he brings is more than welcome. If we had too much of just sad guy Will Smith, this movie would be like a bummer. But Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Benedict Wong bring a lot of just a lot of charisma, a lot of fun to this movie. And look, hashtag PP. There's like 5 different movies here, and some of those movies I really like. Some of them are a little uninspired. Some of them I don't like. It's a very strange thing that maybe I'll try to sort out by the end of this episode. But I really like anytime Benedict Wong has a scene. He's just wonderful.
He is. He's always great. He's Benedict Wong, man. He's Wong. We can do.
He's Wong.
Yeah, he's the helper. He's the guy who's the pilot. He's the guy that he knows he can call when he needs help. He's the safe friend in a time where he knows that his former agency's trying to burn him down. And yeah, he fits that part well. Like I love when he like gets to get up in the middle of the night, or he gets up in the morning because he sees the assassin there and he runs out of the house. And Benedict Wong's like, "You're a terrible house guest. Like just like you're making my life so much more difficult right now." But yeah,
I mean,
great.
It should be said it's very similar to what he's doing in Doctor Strange, right? Like he's the
It's
right
same
hand
energy,
man,
same energy,
bringing some comic relief. Yeah.
Same energy. But yeah, it's a fun performance. One more I want to shout out, just because he is also an alum of our show. But I do want to shout out Ralph Brown as Del Patterson. He plays essentially who is Henry's handler at the DIA, which is actually a real or the DCS, which is actually a real government organization, the Defense Clandestine Service, which is a sub-organization of the Defense Intelligence Agency. But basically plays his handler there. But Ralph Brown is an alum of the show from Alien 3 and Wayne's World 2. We did Wayne's World 2, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, so Del Preston there, the aged roadie who has all the weird stories about getting M&Ms for Ozzy and all that. And
wait, his name is Del in that movie?
His name is Del Preston in that movie, and it's Del Patterson in this movie.
That's fun.
I don't quite know why we keep going to that, but he's just a great, character actor who's in things like With Nail and I and a bunch of other things. But always fun to see him pop up on my screen. Yeah, he plays the guy who's sort of like, he's the I was out of my hands, Henry. I had nothing to do with it. I couldn't do anything. And he keeps giving him cokes instead of alcohol. Like it's a weird quirk where I guess they imply he's got a drinking problem, but they only mention it twice. So it's kind of tough to be like, oh, is this a thing? Or is this just like a random quirk that largely ended up on the cutting room floor? But always fun to see him.
Honestly, pretty tight cast for a movie that takes place in like 5 different countries and has this big espionage thing. There's a few small roles, but I think we covered the main players, and we can talk about the scenes of this movie. And we are going to start with the best scene in the film, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Gemini Man?
I think I'm going to go with our first confrontation between Henry and Junior. This is in is that Budapest? I don't remember where that is. Colombia. This is where he wakes up and he sees there's somebody outside on the roof and he goes running. But what we get is this kind of cat and mouse chase back and forth through the streets of Colombia, through this very, very unique architecture, makes it a lot more interesting to follow as they're kind of going through these kind of buildings through Colombia, out onto the main streets. The vehicles they change between, everything. It's very, very cool. Obviously, you, the audience, know that this is a young version of Will Smith, but there is a brief reveal moment where it's kind of like an oh no, but like it's one of always the things that sucks with like just marketing, because like the hook of the movie is that it's Will Smith versus Will Smith, but
yeah,
the movie has to treat that as a big deal, even though
right.
You know it's coming. So But we get a back and forth with them. We get a really some really inventive action sequences here with a very, very exotic, unique setting that makes it that much more interesting. We see these guys kind of reach a stalemate. Well, not really a stalemate. The younger version pretty much has him dead to rights. And then the police show up and arrest the elder Smith, which saves him basically, because the other guy was about to finish him off. But and at that point, and the only reason that was because the older version hesitated, like he had him dead to rights on the roof at one point, and he saw who he was and didn't do it. So just an interesting back and forth of these guys kind of feeling each other out, but you throw in the good action with some of the unique choices they make with that action, throw in the setting, all of that, and this is where I was basically like, I was like, this is fantastic, this is great. And it's also like out at during the day, which a lot of the rest of the sequences of this movie are like at night, they're in the dark, so this one makes use of its very colorful setting, which is always going to pop more visually and stand out more to me usually anyway. So all of that combines into, and this is like 30 minutes into the movie. It's not very far in, but it's very, very well done.
Yeah, I agree. This is also what I want to highlight as my favorite scene in the movie. I love that it's an action scene during the daytime. There's plenty of nighttime fights too, and that's great, but it's always nice to be able to do it in broad daylight and still have things look really good. I love their cat and mouse. I love the fact that he has him, elder Will Smith has younger one like in his sights, but can't pull the trigger just at the shock of being like, that's me. Like, even though like that person's trying to kill you, how do you pull the trigger on yourself? And it's what's also interesting, you talk about, the marketing kind of has to spoil stuff, is even though they realize it's like a young Will Smith, their first thought is like it's maybe his kid, or at least that's Mary Elizabeth Winstead's first thought. Like, they don't immediately go to clone because they don't know they're in a sci-fi movie, which I thought that was kind of interesting. How long it takes funny, to realize exactly what he is. At any rate, I love this dirt bike chase. It was like the big thing in the marketing was them on the dirt bikes, but seeing that long oneer that they do of elder Will Smith like weaving through the alley and driving up like that hill to get a good like sight of the city, it looks incredible. Like, this movie looks so good. Most of the visual effects snafus here and there aside, it's a great looking movie. And it's during this scene where I'm like, I was on board for the movie for the most part up until then. Like, there were some action scenes before. You've got that crew that's sent to try to kill Will Smith, and he dispatches of them, and Danny has to take out a few herself. It's a good action scene, but once we get here, I'm like, man, this thing is cooking. If this is the rest of the movie, like, I'm so on board. This felt very John Woo to me, like in the best ways possible. Especially at the very end where older Will Smith crashes and you've got young Will Smith on a dirt bike and he's literally beating him up with the dirt bike. Like, he's tail whipping him. Like, logically, this makes no sense. He's an assassin. He should just get off and put a bullet in his head or stab him or whatever. But he's choosing to fight with a dirt bike, which I've never seen before. And that's awesome. And it culminates with Will Smith is laid out on the ground. Young Will Smith is going to do this huge tail whip into his face. And old Will Smith does like I don't know what you call it, like a push up where you throw your whole body off the ground so the tire goes underneath him. It's so absurd and over the top and ridiculous, but fun. And I'm like, man, you're showing me stuff I've never seen before. It's it's a clone fighting. It's a ridiculous. It's like in Zoolander, but instead of breakdance fighting, they're dirt bike fighting.
It is patently absurd, but no, my favorite thing about how it looks just like John Woo is like when they spin around each other, there's a bunch of doves for no reason. No, there's no actual doves. No. I'm just kidding. It's was it Mission Impossible that like randomly a bunch of doves flew onto the screen right at the beginning where they were driving the cars in circles around each other, and I was like, of course there's doves. It's John Woo. But
I think in Mission Impossible there's doves when he's like in the underground bunker walking through fire. I think doves fly by.
Why? Why are they here? Why are they just randomly appearing all the time? I don't understand. Anyway, Yeah, this is just a great sequence, back and forth, the chase, the fighting, everything. It's really really great, and obviously sets the stage for the rest of our film. But it is extremely well done.
It's good. I wish we had more of this, but this kind of energy happens a few times. They're my favorite scenes in the movie. The very next time they come face to face, older Will Smith has arranged to. He's going to let Danny go. He's been promised that she'll be safe, but she's not involved with this, and he wants to hand her over to young Will Smith. It's the only person he'll allow. And the movie does something pretty clever. Look, hashtag PP. This movie has a lot of like tired tropes, a lot of by the number stuff, a lot of stuff that happens exactly how you'd expect. But a scene I found particularly interesting, and I did not see coming, is whenever he hands Danny over, she goes to the meeting spot. Young Will Smith, this is the part I mentioned earlier, tells her she has to strip down to her underwear, so we get a few gratuitous shots of the one female character standing there in underwear, so we can pat her down, and checks her hair and everything for a wire, for a microphone, doesn't find anything. And then he takes her like into like catacombs, which where are we at this point? Is this Budapest, or we're in another country by now?
I think. Yeah.
Okay, so they go underground to like catacombs, and she is really trying to work on him. At this point, she knows that he's a clone. And she's trying to make him realize, like, something's up with this mission. Like, don't you think it's odd that you guys look exactly the same and you are, evenly matched? And she's like, what are you going to do if he tries to run out of here? Oh, you've laid a tripwire. Oh, if he uses gas? Oh, you have a gas mask. You thought of that. Like, she's talking out loud about the situation. Come to find out, she has a microphone inside her mouth disguised as like it goes on one of her teeth or whatever. And so the reason I was so taken aback is because whenever she's saying all that stuff out loud, I didn't feel like she was relaying information to someone. But in retrospect, It's very obvious what she was doing. I thought it was very cool they were able to pull that off. It's like that thing in sitcoms whenever a character is obviously lying and they go, no, I don't know who ate all the ice cream, but the other character doesn't pick up on them doing the obvious lying thing. That kind of stuff drives me crazy. But it doesn't do that. Yeah. She's not telegraphing in a way that it gives it away. So I thought that was actually a genuinely very smart trick this movie pulls off. And then the ensuing fight between the Will Smiths is absolutely incredible. And this is one that, like, how did they pull this off? Because they fight in these catacombs. The only light is from Mary Elizabeth Winstead holding up a rifle with like a flashlight on it. And so there's like a spotlight on the two of them having this fist fight, which is very well choreographed, but lit so dramatically. And it's like the editing must have been a nightmare. The previs must have been crazy. Like, of course, you got all the special effects on top of that, of it being two Will Smiths. I was really like in awe of their ability to pull this off and have it look good. And it helps that they're in the dark, but it looks so stylish. And these two scenes in particular, like, I wish this was the whole movie. I know this sounds backhanded towards the movie as a whole. It's a complicated thing, but if this movie was just like this man has to fight himself and they meet up every 20 minutes in a different country and have a knockdown drag out fight, I'm sold. Let's have fun. That's great. Like, either lean into that and drop the slight attempts to get heady, or go the opposite direction. The problem that I have with this movie is it tries to do, it's like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I'm having the most fun during these confrontations. These two in particular, are just, they're very well done.
I agree. No notes. Like, truly, honestly, like, it's just they're extremely well done. Like I said, there's moments this movie is just genuinely firing on all cylinders. The stuff that it's doing is just inventive. It's unique. Like those catacomb scenes, I was genuinely enthralled with those. The way they're making that look good. And like, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about how the technology looks so good. Like, it's these errant lights, and yet the de-aging tech in these scenes looks immaculate. Like, it looks like genuinely like you almost can't tell. But it's just done so well. And like when the flares are brought in and everything, and then like it escapes. And don't get me wrong, there is plenty of criticism to probably be had about how a clone of someone would not grow up to be exactly like the person they're cloned of. That's just not really how that works. Um, but these sequences, they work extremely well. The stuff with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, like you said, covertly kind of laying out the scenario for the Elder Smith so that he is prepared. All of that, it just comes off so well. And then all of this fight in the catacombs is just, it's again, you talk about a unique look, you talk about a unique location. It's low lit, which obviously helps with the technology piece of it. But there's guys who just, they're throwing each other into these piles of skulls and bones, and it's just really wild. And it's one of those things where I'm like, this is just cool. Like, it's just, it's just cool to watch. And yeah, unfortunately, our final fight does not take place amongst a bunch of skulls and bones. I'm just saying, maybe
every fight should take place amongst skulls and bones.
It
Mortal
makes them way
Kombat
cooler.
got it right.
It knew what it was doing. And then you rip out your opponent's skull and bones and throw them into the pile. Perfect.
So wild. That's what happened in this movie. He just rips his clone apart. But that is something I was wondering watching the movie. I'm like, okay, one of them dies, right? Like, the young one has to kill the old one, old one kills the other. That's. I thought it would be going somewhere there. What I was surprised by is after the second fight, they're basically on the same page. Like, even though at the end of the fight, the younger one says, "I'm nothing like you," and leaves, the next thing he does is go to Clive Owen, who he thinks is his adoptive father, and he realizes that him being an orphan was a lie, and he calls him out, and they have their conflict. And despite that, Clive Owen still sends him back in the field to try to kill the older one, but instead of killing him, they join forces. He reveals that the older one has a tracker in his arm. That's how they always know where he is, so he helps them pull it out. And then they stage their plan to have their final, to try to take down Gemini itself. I was surprised by that. I don't know. I thought we have a lot more. I mean, the fights we do get between them are great, but you go into that last fight and they're on the same team, and it's hashtag positivity podcast. Don't want this note too hard, but there's not really much conflict at this point, or the movie's kind of lost its whole steam, I guess, going into it. There's still some cool action in this final confrontation. I mean, they do Benedict Wong dirty. They just blow him up in a van. They team up to make this final stand, like in this, I guess, like convenience store. They take out a team of soldiers that comes after them, and then Clive Owen releases like a secret weapon. And there's this big dramatic shot of this Daft Punk looking guy running through the streets, jumps 10 feet onto the roof of the convenience store, drops down through the window, and they're fighting this mystery opponent that is handling both of them pretty handily. And Andrew, was there any question who was underneath that helmet?
There was a brief thought that maybe it was young Clive Owen. I had a brief moment where, like, I thought maybe he was like, he had that like backup plan of like, maybe Henry's going to always sort of have a conscience, and that's going to get in my way. But you know who doesn't? Me. And I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that was the direction they were going to go, because there was part of my brain that was like, there's no way we're just going to do a third Will Smith, are we? Folks, spoilers, it's a third Will Smith.
What's funny, though, is if they pulled off his helmet and it was 18-year-old Clive Owen, I might have been
Would anybody know?
Who was that? Yeah, exactly. You are not a sitcom. I don't know who you are.
Turns into that clip from Justice League Unlimited where the Flash and Lex Luthor switch bodies. And so the Lex Luthor in the Flash's body runs into the bathroom, and he's like, well, at least I can find out who the Flash is. And he pulls off the mask and looks in the mirror and goes, I have no idea who this is.
That's so good.
Aren't you going to wash your hands? No, because I'm evil.
I wasn't shocked by the reveal, but
that's clearly the driving logic, is it's just going to be the other version. Just say there was a brief moment where I was like, maybe.
He has a line of like, this version doesn't speak, and he says something about he edited out the emotions or something from him or whatever. So this one was supposed to be like a just a blunt weapon, and this is when Clive Owen in his final scenes talks about how this is more humane, this is for humanity, but we just haven't had the time to really ruminate on that. And I think there is something interesting there. That's kind of what I'm talking about, this movie being, four different things at once and not really committing to either lane, when I think whichever lane it wanted to go. If it picked one or two of these ideas and dug into them, I think we'd have something better. But overall, I said this at the beginning. If you were to ask me, Rotten Tomato style, give this a thumbs up or thumbs down, I don't. I think I give thumbs up because like the scenes we talked about, like our favorites, are great, and I've never seen anything quite like them. And that alone, I think, is worth the price of admission. One thing we haven't talked about is that this movie was shot at 120 frames per second, which I think the only way to truly watch it that way was in select theaters. I think there's literally like 12 in the country, something like that, where you can see this in theaters play at 120 frames per second, which is it's almost like the soap opera effect. It is a jarring thing to see. You know, like with the PS5 now, most games have like the graphic effect or the performance mode or whatever they call them. Like, have you turned that on, Andrew, in Spider-Man 2, the high frame rate?
No.
It's insane. Like it takes a while to get used to. And that's, you know, we've been watching movies at 24 frames per second for ever, that anything beyond that is just gonna feel weird. And I was really trying to figure out how this is playing at home, because I couldn't find anything specifically on Gemini Man, but I think I saw Billy Lynn, which is also shot at 120 frames per second, that the 4K is 60 frames per second, because that was the max you could do for that format. But I don't know about digitally. And I watched this movie digitally. I watched the digital 4K. I rented it. And it wasn't playing back at 120 frames per second, I don't think, but it definitely felt different than 24 frames per second. And I don't know if it was the playback or just because it was shot that way, it's going to end up feeling different. But there was times when like find myself like looking at the detail of someone's mouth as they talk or they move, or like too much stuff feels in focus. Like something felt weird about this movie overall, right? Beyond the special effect of the double, of the cloning, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that might be what I was seeing during the fight to an extent, is just that it was just smoothed over in such a way that it almost looked like CGI, which just feels like such a weird experience. It's, you know, he's the director, do it how you want, but it definitely created a weird viewing experience.
It's funny, what I've heard about I haven't seen a movie in theaters in 120 frames per second, but like all the feedback I've ever heard online or people that have done it is not good. I hear one of two things. I hear, I hated it, it looked weird, or I hear, well, you know, it's pushing technology forward and it's interesting. It's interesting these, because it's like this movie, Billy Lynn, I think the Hobbit movies, the only ones I've heard of, and like, you know, it's an interesting technology and pushing, you know, just that kind of real detached, you know, I appreciate it for what it is kind of thing. But I haven't heard anybody that's seen a movie 120 frames per second and went, it's awesome. You've got to go see it this way. This is the future of filmmaking. Like I've never heard that kind of praise for it. But
I always love conversations. It's interesting. I think is one of the most, I say this as nicely as I can. It feels like one of the most backhanded ways you can compliment something.
Yeah.
When someone's like, "Oh, what'd you think of it?" and you're like, "Oh, it was interesting," and it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, you
it's
know,
like when your mom.
It's
like when your mom says a movie was cute. It's like,
yeah,
what?
You know, like
so was it bad?
My dad's kind of like that. No offense to my dad, but like I'll be talking to my dad and be like, "What'd you think of that?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was interesting." And I was like, "Oh, so you didn't like it?" Like that's kind of the code for me, where it's like it was interesting. I was like, "Oh, so it wasn't good. It was interesting. How is something interesting but not good?" But like, it's 120 frames per second feels like kind of like. From most of what I've read and seen about it, which is not a lot to be fair, because it's not really, like you said, it's not something that people are really going for. It's a little bit like 3D, and that, like, you know, 3D was a real big fad twice, I guess, because, you know, in the 80s we had our 3D run, and then we tried it again in like the late aughts, early 10s. But it's 120 frames per second feels a little bit like, you know, when I talk about like John Carpenter's Halloween, I talk about how when that movie plays in 4K, I think I'm seeing things I'm not supposed to see. Like when he made the movie, when he made it, and you take that tape and you up it to 4K and you increase that quality in that picture so much, I feel like I am seeing the movie not necessarily in the way that it was intended. Obviously, John Carpenter approves these things; he signs off on them. I'm not giving him any fault there. But like Halloween is one of those movies that I'm like, I feel like that's a movie that's like designed to be seen on VHS. Like that is how Halloween is supposed to be watched.
I remember watching The Evil Dead, or maybe Evil Dead 2, probably both of them, with mutual friend Doug on Blu-ray for the first time, not even 4K, and like you could see the moon was like a screen that they superimposed, and it's like we were never supposed to see these details,
right?
Like,
and so like it feels like a modern version of that to an extent, where like we're adding in so much information or so much that it's like I just don't want to see it this way. It just looks weird and off-putting. Like I almost literally I found a VHS of Halloween at Half Price Books one day, and I bought it just because my brain is like, I wonder if like I would genuinely enjoy the experience of watching this on tape more than 4K. I still own the 4K, so I'm a chump, but it's can't pass that up. I've got the weirdest trilogy box set of Halloween sitting next to me, Halloween 6, and then the two movies that ignore Halloween 6 in one trilogy box together. But
very weird. You just unlocked a memory. I remember one time we rented Halloween, the original Halloween, on VHS, because this was a long time ago, and it's the only VHS I have ever seen that was presented in letterbox format. It was widescreen on our little
seen tapes like that
TV.
before.
Nope. Well, once, Andrew, was Halloween. So
interesting, because they would do that. It would be like letterboxed is what they called it, because they basically had to like cut the top and the bottom of not cut it necessarily, but they had to
add the black bars
the space. They had to add the black bars on the top and the bottom. But then if you watched it then on like a widescreen TV, it had bars on the side now too.
Yeah.
Because the way it presented it is that it had to create the projection image includes the black bars, which is just so weird to think about. But yeah, like I think I had a tape of Ghostbusters 2 that was like that, where like it had the bars at the top and the bottom, whereas my tape of Ghostbusters didn't. And that's actually what I'm curious about, trying to watch like a VHS. Can I even watch them on a flat screen TV, and is it going to stretch it to fit the image, or do I really have to go down to a pawn shop and find an old CRT TV to watch these dumb things? But
isn't it crazy how many, I think of all the VHSs I watched, and just knowing that they were all pan and scan, or that what does it say? This movie's been formatted to fit your TV or whatever.
Formatted,
like they were all cropped and edited. But like I, growing up, never thought anything of it.
Never.
Like I'm just seeing the movie how it's supposed to be seen. But like, I wonder how jarring it would feel to go back and watch Ninja Turtles or something now, like knowing.
I bet you would see TMNT 90. I'm curious if TMNT 90 is another movie that's kind of meant to be seen in a lower quality. Like rumor of the 4K from Arrow is coming out, which I was actually incorrect about. Golden Harvest is not who Shout had their agreement with. That was with Golden Princess.
Okay.
But so that could be a stateside Arrow release of Ninja Turtles in 4K. But and that might have to be a day one purchase. I don't know that I want to I don't know if I want to risk waiting for a sale for that one. But
that's a pre-order right away. I mean, it has to be.
Yeah.
They're already just with HD Turtles. You can find plenty of screenshots of seeing the stunt double's eyes or mouth through the mouth of the Ninja Turtle.
Jesus. So I don't know. That's another tape that if I find one in the wild, I might buy as TMNT 90, because I have Halloween and I have Batman 89, because mostly I just remember the commercials at the beginning of Batman 89. That's neckties. But there's some things that I just wonder, and they're like $5. I'm not like spending.
Isn't there a Pepsi ad, a Batman Pepsi ad?
Diet Coke.
Alfred's got it.
Diet Coke.
Is it Diet Coke? Okay.
Because I came up with a joke costume that I could have done for Halloween one year of getting a Diet Coke costume and putting a bat cape on it. Because at the end of that commercial, there's a Diet Coke with a bat cape on it for some reason.
That's a great costume for someone that wants to explain their costume all night long.
Exactly. Like it's a reference that I would specifically need to be at a party that like you and Doug were at, and I would be like, this is the only place I can wear this because no one else will understand this. Or I would have to like wear it to like a pub crawl or something and be like, the 8 people that recognize me, those are the real ones.
I don't think I ever finished the point I was making about Gemini Man, and that it's hard to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, because there's scenes I really love. Overall, I think the movie's kind of a mess. I think there's a lot of story stuff that is very rote and generic. You know, he's a hitman that decides he has to retire because he could have killed a kid. It's almost exactly like the Bourne Identity, that he couldn't kill his target because there was a kid present. There's you know, a clone kind of doing like the Frankenstein's monster thing. If I don't have parents, you know, who am I really? Like, there's a lot of themes that we've seen before, and dare I say,
you just reminded
PP.
me of a line of dialogue in this movie that tripped me up the first time I heard it.
Okay.
And he's like, "How do you know what my birthday is if I'm an orphan?" And I'm like, "Dude, your birthday's still written down." Like, it's just one moment, like it's in that conversation with Clive Owen.
I thought
and
the
he's
exact same
How
thing.
do you know my birthday if I'm an orphan? And I'm like, dude, it's not like you dropped into the world as a mystery. Like, it's not like we don't know.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, there's stuff like that though. But I think it's still like worth seeing as an oddity, as a curiosity for the scenes alone. So I think I end up with the thumbs up. If it's binary like that, I mean, I think I fall into the 83% audience score of people saying, yeah, I recommend this movie. But what's crazy, look, we've talked about like 3 scenes, Andrew, maybe 4. I feel like we've covered the whole movie. The running time is 1 hour and 57 minutes. This is not a short movie. But what other scenes have we left to talk about that we really need to dive into, you know?
Yeah, there's really not.
I mean,
it's not
there's
a short movie, but I almost expected it to be longer. Like, I almost expected it to be like a little bit of like a you know, adding in that runtime for whatever. But it's yeah, it is just interesting because there's about 3 or 4 like major action set pieces, and then the rest of the movie's pretty quiet in its approach. Like, it kind of plays it low key, and it kind of saves those big action moments for those big set pieces, and then kind of just lets it breathe in between. And you can disagree or agree with that approach as you see fit, but it does mean that ultimately there's not that many scenes that I think you need to talk about.
The very end of this movie, it jumps 6 months later, and Junior is attending college, still deciding on a major apparently, but Danny
You can do
and
that? You can go to college
Henry,
and not know what you're going to do?
apparently, because like, oh, what do you? Was he just touring the? I feel like he was in class, right? But maybe he was
like,
just.
You just came from somewhere, didn't you?
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna do engineering. It's like, you don't know? What do you? You take?
How'd you get here?
So Danny and Henry visit as a. It's funny because like there's no romance between Danny and Henry, which good. Even though the movie does do the trope of the young woman teamed up with the older dude. They don't go to the romantic path, but still at the end, they feel like surrogate parents to Junior. That's kind of the roles they've taken on, and they're arguing back and forth about what's best for him. And he's like, "Oh, I just want to be my own person," and you know that's kind of the whole theme of the movie. But #PP. The movie in no way earned this. I don't feel like this is a family. Like, you know, like the way they're like arguing what's best for him, whatever. Like, I'm like, oh, was this the movie you were trying to be? And it kind of goes back to my earlier thing of like, it's trying to do 5 different things. This felt so. It plays almost like a studio note. Hey, you've got to add this on. But like, I don't even know why the studio would come up with that note. And it doesn't help that them just casually talking in the courtyard of this university is the #PP worst looking the CG de-aging stuff looks. I feel like the scene might have been a late edition. Like it's that much
wasn't
worse.
Wasn't quite enough time to let that finish cooking there. But
yeah,
no, I agree. It's a very odd scene that I don't think the movie could have like not built up to, but the movie as it unfolds really doesn't earn this at all.
Yeah. #PP.
#PP.
But like I said, overall, yeah, I recommend it. It's I'm trying to think of a movie to compare it to, but I don't want to like dog another movie. But like, the action scenes are why you watch it, but I don't feel like the rest of the movie is like a drag to the point where it's hard to. That's why I still recommend it, because even the stuff that maybe doesn't work as well isn't like insulting to me, and it's not like
Right.
offensively bad. It's just it kind of borderlines between serviceable to great. That's the sandbox we're playing in. It never dips down to anything worse than that.
I agree.
Andrew, even after you telling me that I think I'm a clone now was just a Weird Al, I haven't listened to it, but I assume it's a play on I Think We're Alone Now. I think
Yes,
I'm
it
a
is.
clone now. Okay.
Yep.
I feel like I've heard everything I need to hear. I don't know if I need to listen to the song. I think I get it. I get the joke. Maybe I'll listen to it for the month is over. But it's going to be a fun month. I'm excited to keep this thing rolling. But right now, Andrew, it's time that we enter AA. Ask Andrew. This is how we end every episode. I ask you a question. You
Folks,
have to answer.
is calling this segment AA insensitive?
This isn't Andrew Asks. Andrew, what are you doing? It's Ask Andrew. You don't get to ask the people questions. They ask you. If you have any hard thoughts on that, I guess let us know. But, I just like to spring a question on you. Sometimes I go to the listeners for some help. If you want to ask Andrew something yourself, you can hop into our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. Come and join us if you haven't already. There's a channel called Ask Andrew, a channel that Andrew himself cannot see. And that's where I'm going today. This is from Zavazda, who asks, Andrew, do hitmen exist? Full disclosure, there's a lot of history behind this question. We'll dive into it in a moment, but I just want to start clean here and ask you, do hitmen exist in the real world?
In as much as, are there people that get paid to kill other people? Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So you're about where I was here, Andrew. So, without getting way into the weeds here, this was a long-running debate over multiple Discord servers. Some recent events involving a man named Luigi. There was initial speculation that this could have been a hit, right? And some people found that very laughable because, of course, they're not hitmen in the real world. But then we realized there's kind of just a lot of gray here. And I think from the people that say hitmen don't exist, what they're talking about is like John Wick style, or Hitman video game style, a guy in a suit that's a contract killer that, if you know the right person, if you can get his phone number and call him. We literally
just watched a movie about one. So,
well, that's the question. So he was a government agent. I guess, getting paid to kill people. But without regard, is a soldier a hitman? They get a salary and part of their job.
Well, in the case of this, they were specifically manipulating the information they were giving him because he thought he was killing bad people, but it turns out he wasn't. So there's a little bit more of a moral gray area there. But I mean, yeah, like the idea of the John Wick hitman, here's the thing. I don't know. I don't know. More to the point, I probably don't want to know. Like,
sure. Yeah.
I don't want to know that, but I can't say. There's a whole lot of luxury high rises in downtown Chicago, and I don't think there's that many rich people. But if they're all just hitmen, who knows? But I imagine the one normal person that manages to get rich enough to buy one, and they just keep walking around. They're like, these guys are home all day, and then they disappear for 3 months at a time. It's so weird. But I as far as the John Wick or the idea of the hitman who lives in the fancy house because every hit is $10 million into his bank account, stuff like that I don't know. I think I would be more inclined to say that fixers are real. The people that clean up situations, I would be more inclined to think that that's probably a more likely thing that exists.
Sure.
But the John Wick style hitman, I would lean more towards no. But are there people out there that get paid to kill other people? Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually a Wikipedia page of known hitmen, as you can imagine.
I mean, you look back in the days of the gang and the mob and stuff.
That's
like
exactly. That's like 80% of
yeah,
them are like, yeah, they were
absolutely. And then there's also like, I have this book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, who I believe I don't know how true it is, but the presumption the book makes is that purposeful destabilization of things could be considered a hit. If you purposely manipulate things to destroy a company or destroy a foreign government, like, are those hits because you're resulting in people dying by your direct actions? And it's supposedly this tell-all from a guy that claims that used to be his job as like a member of the United States government. He would like go to foreign countries and help destabilize their governments to assist the United States in kind of essentially installing their preferred choice, which is the thing that has also some evidence suggesting it's not entirely untrue. But there are a great many things in this world that I am never going to understand. And, like, I've accepted that I'm not going to understand those things. Like, I was at a dinner once with the COO of my company. And I was trying to rub elbows because I was trying to get a different promotion at the time than the one I ended up getting. But, so I was like, I'm sitting next to him. I'm like across from all these people, and I'm trying to just make good conversation, make a good impression. Exhausting, let me tell you. But he started talking about his life and what he does. And he's like, yeah, we've gone away, we're taking like 5 trips this year. And I was like, dude, I haven't been to the same place 5 times this year outside my house and my job. Like, I don't even know if I go to the same grocery store 5 times a year. Like, I was like, you and I do not live the same lives.
We are not the same.
Don't. And so, but I realized that even he is at a plateau of which there is a plateau above him, where there are people who would talk about their lives and he would feel like I did. Where like, he's like, oh, I'm not that. And that echelon goes up really high. And as you get higher and higher, the rules are different. And the things that you can do are different. And so, is it impossible? No, not at all. But I would say that you and I are never going to run into that. Hopefully.
Here's another
Fingers
level
crossed.
to this, Andrew. Now, a strong argument for Hitman not existing is how often someone is arrested for trying to hire a hitman, but it was actually a police sting. That's very popular. Or there's like websites on the dark web, but they're all scams. There's this podcast, it's called The Kill List, about a journalist that got access to a murder for hire website and started working the police to get all these people arrested who are paying real money to have someone killed, but there's actually no real hitman on the other side. It was all a big scam to steal people's Bitcoin. So there's a lot of that very little evidence of a successful transaction of that kind for hiring a contract killer. But again, my argument is like, yeah, has anyone ever been paid money to kill someone else? Yeah, I'm sure like desperate people have taken a few $100s to do something terrible. Like I'm sure that happened. But the question
again,
is,
you look back to the days of the gang and the mob, like absolutely that stuff happened. Like it absolutely was a thing.
Well, the question here is professional hitman. Andrew, in this context, what does professional mean? If you are paid $200 to kill someone and you do it, are you now a professional hitman?
I mean, yeah. What makes you professional?
You get paid to do it, right? That's my understanding.
Paid a lot to do it.
Well, I don't know. Like minor league baseball players are professional baseball players because they are getting paid a salary. People think, they think majors and they think amateur.
Well, what do you consider? What's the A league for hitmen? What would be the comparable B league? Like it's like
I'm saying is
that to me is the breakdown though. It's like when you talk about like people getting busted on the websites because they try to hire a hitman and it fails. That to me is just that lends more to the sense that like if hitmen are real, they're not for us. They're not accessible to this level of society.
Sure. Yeah.
They are up there. In which case, maybe there is a John Wick type hitman that lives up there because that's how rich you have to be. But
I tend to think getting paid any amount of money for your service makes you a professional at that.
Are we professional podcasters because we've gotten like 87 cents in revenue?
Wait a minute. Let me think about this. Yes. Andrew, let's put it on our resume. We are professional podcasters. Folks, there is no money in podcast advertising, let me tell you.
None. Not if you're not famous already.
That's why everyone has a Patreon. Okay, so like you've mentioned playing in a band previously in college, playing bass.
Yeah.
If your band got paid $100 to play a gig at a bar or whatever, would you become a professional bassist? Or does that make you a professional bassist? You know, you're not quitting your day job.
I don't know. I've been paid to play bass before. It wasn't really in a band scenario. It was in orchestra situations.
So,
but
would you consider yourself a professional bass player?
No.
Why not? What would it take?
Because getting
would you have to make a living off of it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like playing bass isn't my living. I got $50 to play at a church, man. Like, it's like, you know, that literally bought me some extra comics. Like that's all it was.
Well,
like
I mean, early days of the NFL or MLB, and especially, you know, women's league starting out, all those players had off-season jobs.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But they were professionals. I mean, there's no way you could. I mean, I would certainly call them all professional athletes.
You can call me a professional musician if you want.
All right. And a professional podcaster, Andrew. You earned it. I would love to know if anybody else here has thoughts about...
But my stance genuinely is that are there people who have been paid to kill people? Yes. Do John Wick type hitmen exist? That's where I would be like, no. But if they do, it's not for you and me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're in alignment here.
Which, to be fair, John Wick also basically says, like, the whole world of John Wick and the access to somebody like John Wick is very clearly presented in the movie as something for a very different class of people than your average person.
100%. 100%. We'd love to hear you weigh in. Join our Discord discussion if you haven't already. Let us know your thoughts on Hitmen or what it takes to be a professional. What exactly is a professional? It's a fun question to ask yourself. And come back next week as we will be discussing The Island, the Michael Bay movie. Our first time covering a Michael Bay film. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch for our music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. Check our show notes for his SoundCloud link, and check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Check, check. Check 1, 2.
Hello. Folks, welcome back to Talk Radio. This week we're talking about cats. And cats who look like their owners. It's a recent phenomenon, been discovered thanks to the internet cesspool known as TikTok. Not entirely sure it's legit, folks. I think there's a high chance that there's some trickery afoot. But nonetheless, we will be diving into it.
You're listening to BOTR Radio. Don't turn that dial. We'll be right back.
Motherfucker.
Just a real juxtaposition between the NPR discussions and the drops.
The shock jock, yeah.
Yeah. And we're back with BOTR. What I liked about this film is the way Ang Lee really tapped into the question of humanity. You know, what makes a person a person?
You know, he didn't do it as well as he did on literally any other movie he's made, including Hulk. But, you know, there was effort made. I don't know if there was effort made, but at the end of the day, you made a movie, Ang Lee, and that's more than other people can say.
All right. Let's try this again. Starting the music. Now. Ooh, they're not talking about the best of them. They're just talking about the rest of them. Not the best parts, but the worst. What the f***? I'm so sorry. I want to start this over. So sorry.